Peace, everyone. Welcome to African Esquire TV. I'm your host, Tony Cherie. Before I get started, if you have not already, please do like, comment, and subscribe. And I also ask that you would add yourself to my Telegram group. Telegram is a decentralized platform, so censorship is not an issue. Also, please add yourself to my group on Odyssey. Odyssey is a lot like YouTube, but it is also decentralized. So, guys, I'm sure you have been watching the debacle of the Palestine, Israel, United States, and being okay with genocide thing that's been unraveling in front of our eyes. And unfortunately, we've seen once again that the international community is very much a hypocritical institution that operates one direction. It does not operate both ways. It operates in the way of Western colonialism. It does not operate, for the way of the people who are third world, developing, whichever label you're comfortable with, people who are not of that class. And once again, we have to look at the United Nations Security Council and say, how is it possible that people are comfortable with this being the predominant institution inside of the world? I want to remind people that what's happening in Palestine, as far as the international community ignoring it and basically silencing any type of discord on this, it's not the first time this has happened. I mean, we've seen stories come out of the French president saying there's not going to be any protests regarding this, and we'll shut it down. We've heard things like that in the UK. We're hearing this all around, and a lot of people are just shocked, like, hey guys, what happened to you? Never again. Didn't the Holocaust happen? And you guys said, oh, no more. Well, don't forget, there's things that happened after that that also do equal to genocide. One popular one being that there was the horrible genocide of African people inside of the Congo. How interesting that the same French government that is working with the West to keep everyone in place, and the same United States government that's working with the West to keep everyone in place as far as not taking action against the horrible Israeli apartheid system, is the same one that was very much doing the same thing during the Rwanda genocide. In fact, there was talks inside of Washington at the time when there was the Rwanda genocide happening to not say the word genocide, because if you say genocide, by the requirements of the Genocide Convention, you're supposed to intervene. So they would call it acts of genocide are happening instead of calling it a genocide. These people knowingly evade responsibility. These people knowingly are complicit with the system, and they pretend to be so cute with it, like, oh, you guys, there are things happening, we care, but we're just going to find ways to talk and negotiate. Meanwhile, when you look at what's happening in Palestine, for example, imagine if it was Zimbabwe or Cuba or Venezuela or Bolivia bombing the building of the Associated Press. Just imagine what would happen. Imagine any country that is not a lapdog to Western imperialism doing these things. There would be not just an international outcry, there would be direct, swift, and quick action by the United Nations. So the question here is, why do we have the United Nations if it's not a United Nations, if it's just a 5 nations who have the power to tell everyone else in the world what to do without any accountability to that as being the institution that people are supposed to submit to? I'm going to read from an article because, it's very crazy the things that have been happening in relation to the international human rights world, where people who pretend to care about human life all of a sudden can not watch the news or are not getting updates. All of a sudden they're looking the other way, because this is how the Western imperialist system works. Israel-Palestine. The U.S. blocks the United Nations statement for a third time in a week. Now, understand when it says the United States, that's under the direction of Joe Biden. So Joe Biden has blocked the UN submitting a statement on Israel for a third time. So let's look at this. A third United Nations Security Council emergency meeting in a week amid the deadly Israeli offensive in Gaza has again ended with no concrete outcome, after the United States blocked a joint statement calling for an immediate ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. How interesting. This is not even them condemning Israel for their barbaric acts against the Palestinians. This is just calling for a ceasefire. And the United States blocked not once, not twice, 3 times, even calling for a ceasefire. Keep in mind, calling for a ceasefire, are they going to listen? Well, that in itself, putting out a statement, is not going to be enough to make them listen. A lot of the things happen behind the scenes. But even to show face, even to pretend to care, the United States did not mind saying no, do not call for a ceasefire. Let Israel essentially end these people. Understand that what's happening over there is not the Israeli government by itself. It's the United States complicit and conspiring with the Israeli government. The meeting on Sunday came after the US reportedly twice blocked over the next week resolutions that would have condemned Israel's military response and called for a ceasefire. Nearly 200 people, including 58 children, have been killed in the intense bombing of the besieged enclave of 2 million people. Israel has justified its bombing campaign as a retaliation to rocket attacks by Hamas fighters. But the Gaza-based Hamas movement said its actions were a response to the Israeli forced displacement of Palestinians in occupied East Jerusalem and storming the Al-Aqsa Mosque by Israeli forces last week. Israel had missed a Hamas deadline to withdraw its forces from the mosque compound. The latest round of inaction also comes as the US President Joe Biden gives no sign of plans to step up public pressure on Israel, instead repeatedly stressing Israel's right to defend itself. Just some quick updates. There's been some things happening. So now Joe Biden is supposedly backing a ceasefire as of recently. And I don't even know if this is through the United Nations. Supposedly he told this one-on-one to Benjamin Netanyahu. At the same day, he also signed a bill saying we're going to give you $735 million worth of military equipment. They also said, oh, you guys should do a ceasefire. Meaning he's just talking out of the side of his neck. We should know that people say things to try to quell protests or to pretend that they care, pretend that they are concerned with the situation, but it's not really to do anything to change what is already in place. It's instead to give the public a sense that you have some type of moral decency even when you don't. But this is not really about the United States and Israel's horrible, horrible atrocities in this specific video. It's about the United Nations' horrible atrocities. Why do you exist? It should be the question of every single country, every African country, every country of people who are not in the Security Council permanent members, because they have 5 permanent members and they have non-permanent members. But only those 5 permanent members, if I can remember from the top of my head, United States, Russia, China, France, and England, 5 countries have veto power over the entire world. Meaning one person, all 4 members, you got 4 of those 5 members say we're going to go one way. One member said, I don't really like that. Veto. The entire world has to listen. This is a colonial institution. I've said this on the channel before, and I'm saying it again. This is a colonial institution. My opinion, honestly, is that no people with any self-dignity should even go to the United Nations and pretend that these people are ruling even-handedly. My opinion is that if any country truly believes that they have any right to sovereignty, they would not go with this as being the global force. Of course, we're forced into a situation at sometimes, but if you're going to be forced into the situation, do so in a way that's going to ultimately ensure that you can exit from that situation, meaning don't stay in the United Nations comfortably. Stay in the United Nations so long as you need to organize an effective resistance against that as a colonial institution. Let's just understand once and for all that the human rights world is a colonial world. The people who care, they only care in certain circumstances. The countries who are outraged, they're only outraged whenever it's against their interests. All of this outrage is fake. None of it is sincere. And the quicker we realize this, the quicker we will be able to disengage from this nonsense ideology that after World War II, the countries just got together and said, let's do the right thing around the world. I'm hopeful, I'm prayerful, and ultimately I'm believing that this just can't keep going on. How many times do we have to be faced with these contradictions before we say that clearly this idea of the United Nations is one that has to be discarded and done away with? Otherwise, you have no respect for yourself or your people as being a people who are independent, sovereign, and autonomous. That's all I have for this video. I love to hear your thoughts. I will see you guys in the next video.
A poem for us, the African woman. Beautiful, dark, luxurious, fearless, selfless power. Through all the words thrown our way, we are the beautiful source, discarded, disrespected, but highly favored and replicated. We are her, she is us, the African woman. Uncompromising, steadfast, and unwavering in love. Innocent, playful, generous, and deserving. We are African women. At home and abroad, we are delicious melanin, splendid carbon. We drink ourselves to death with love and compassion, forgiving and thorough. We are African women. Join us in May for our symposium on Pan-African women.
Hey family, this is Tierney Cherie. I'm here to make an announcement that I'm very, very excited to make. I'm excited because I really think this is something that is important for our people. Otherwise, I would not have devoted so much time and energy towards it. So I finished my first book, and the book title is Fostering False Identity, the Child Welfare System's Design of Social Control of the Black Family. Now, why is this book something that I think will be very important for our community? Well, number one, it's dealing with the system of white supremacy, particularly the way that the system has targeted our children. If you don't know, our children are literally our future. Without our children, we have no future. And so understand that the system is very crafty when figuring out what to derail first. And to me, it's no mistake that the system particularly went after the Black family. If you look at what happened whenever we were enslaved by this system, and continues to go after the Black family, continues to go after Black children, continues to try to villainize African parents. So for that, I wanted to particularly talk about this subject. Now, the other thing that the book will deal with is our African identities. Why is it that our African identities are a threat to the system? Why is it that whenever we want to identify ourselves as being African, we get so much drawback inside of the Black community? I think a lot of us are not aware of the history of assimilationist thought inside of our community, this idea that we have to be close to white in order to be accepted. And so that's another subject that we delve into in this book. So I'm hoping that anyone who is, obviously, if you're a parent, a Black parent, and you really want to understand why it is that these systems are going after your children, I encourage you to read this book. I hope that it will arm you with a lot of knowledge and a lot of foresight, not just about how to protect your own children, but how to organize in your community, because that's really the purpose of the book, is to say that we have to organize among ourselves in order to protect ourselves from this white supremacist system. And then obviously, if you're an organizer in general, this is something that I think is important for you to read, because like I said, this is a subject in the Black community that we just don't discuss enough. Child welfare is not something that is going to get enough attention. People obviously will organize them around other causes, but this is one that is really important that I feel like we have to pay more attention to.